This week's topic is willingness. And what Swamiji writes about this is, willingness must be cultivated deliberately. It is an attitude of mind and depends not on outward conditions. Most people are willing or unwilling, depending on their likes and dislikes. This habit tends to develop a bias towards unwillingness, which gradually becomes chronic and attracts to itself chronic failure. Don't wait for favorable circumstances to awaken willingness in you. Train yourself in the attitude of saying yes to life. Often by this simple attitude, you will find success arriving unexpected at your door. And let's affirm together, first out loud and then more quietly, repeating after me. I welcome everything that comes to me as an opportunity for further growth. I welcome everything that comes to me as an opportunity for further growth. More quietly, I welcome everything that comes to me as an opportunity for further growth. And now whispering, I welcome everything that comes to me as an opportunity for further growth. And now mentally only, offering it up to the point between the eyebrows. I welcome everything that comes to me as an opportunity for further growth. And let's mentally listen to this prayer. Lord, help me to overcome the satanic pull of unwillingness. The more I embrace life in your name, the more I feel your joy. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And now we also very often will have a reading from Swami Kriyanandaji's Rays of the One Light. And this week's topic is to each according to his faith. And this includes parallel passages from the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. John, chapter 3, we read, Everyone that doeth evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. But he that doeth truth cometh to the light, that his deeds may be made manifest, that they are wrought in God. And Swamiji writes, it is a common experience, shared by most people, that when a person errs, he experiences a desire to hide that error from his conscience, instead of holding it up for purification. Error clutches its misdeeds to itself and resists correction, though it is only in that state of purity that we can achieve perfect freedom. It requires an act of will to offer that awareness up to the light and to hold it there until one's inner darkness is completely dissipated. For every state of consciousness has its own attractive power, and the more we allow that attraction to act upon us, the more we attract to ourselves the objective circumstances and experiences natural to it. Our faith is the attractive power of our underlying state of consciousness. Goodness attracts goodness. It takes goodness to even see goodness. Evil attracts evil, and it takes evil even to see evil, that is, to take special note of its existence. Whatever there is in you of darkness or light, offer it up to the heights. In the supreme light alone will we find salvation. Accept nothing less in yourself as your lasting reality. As the Bhagavad Gita says in the 12th chapter, cling now to me, clasp me with heart and mind, so shalt thou dwell surely with me on high. But if thy thought droops from such height, if thou beest weak to set body and soul upon me constantly. Despair not, give me lower service. Seek to reach me, worshipping with steadfast will. And if thou canst not worship steadfastly, work for me, toil in works pleasing to me. For he that laboureth right for love of me shall finally attain. But if in this thy faint heart fails, bring me thy failure. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Well, it's a great joy, again, being here with you. This time is very strange. I'm giving a Sunday satsang from my bedroom in Kandala because we are practicing social distancing here, and we are a monastery and it's group living, and so in our group areas we do wear masks, as many are now all over the world. And this topic that we'll be talking about today is about being a warrior for the light. And I want to especially talk about just simply, I'm going to shift a little bit, the idea of being a warrior, period, and being a spiritual warrior. This is a very important quality and aspect to have right now during this time, because there is a lot of pull of darkness, of anger, of fear, of denial, all these different emotions swirling in the air, and negative emotions. Let's face it, I don't think anyone is free right now of a certain amount of anxiety for their future, their job, the economy. I think for many people, the virus is just one small part of this. It's an important part of it. It's a reality. And it's the reality of this world right now is something that we can't change. It's a mass karma that is overtaking the world. And whether you want to call it a mass delusion or the hand of God or the darkness, whatever you want to call it, it hardly even matters. It is a reality that we do have to deal with it. And we have to learn how to deal with it in a very positive way. And in order to do that, it takes a certain inner strength and sort of a warrior quality to be able to overcome when people are in negativity and you see hunger and you see fear and you see anger and you see suffering. And so this time, it is a time to be very strong. And it's also a very blessed time because there's so much potential for spiritual growth. There's also so much potential for giving in to fear and negativity. And so it's, in some ways, it's almost like a fork in the road that we are being forced to choose much more clearly and vividly, whether to be an instrument for light and strength and compassion, love, calmness for others, or whether to be part of the fear or the anger or all the different qualities that are swirling around. Our Guru Paramhansa Yoganandaji, he was a warrior. In his past lifetimes, he said that he was Arjuna in his past life. Arjuna was a great warrior. Yoganandaji spoke of others of his past lives. And very often he was really the same, a warrior. And you saw in him, he had a real power, a real spiritual power that comes from being a warrior. Even his birth, his family, he was born into a Kshatriya family, a family of the warrior caste and consciousness of service to others, but also of this strength of giving to others. And his whole life, he needed to be very, very strong. He went to America, and in a way he was conquering this foreign country with his love, with his power, but he also went through a lot of persecution when he went to America. He really had to be very, very strong. And he was, discriminated against. He was in the deep South in America where there's a lot of ignorance and discrimination. And there was a sheriff who was starting to go after him and was wanting to arrest him. And he had to go through a lot that many people don't realize. And he was able to get through it because of this inner strength. Swami Kriyanandaji, he talked about a particular quality that Yogananda had that was really extremely notable. He described it as Master's incredible willpower. And this is the strength that a warrior has, is willpower. It comes also as willingness, as this reading that we heard of Swamiji's on willingness. And it comes from being willing in a dynamic, positive way to do whatever is right and what is needed, and not to go based on our own likes and dislikes. When we are ruled by likes and dislikes, we just go up and down. Sometimes we have energy, sometimes we don't have energy. And so a warrior in the battle doesn't worry about what he likes and what he doesn't like. He does what needs to be done. And this was Swami Kriyanandaji's life. On Tuesday, we celebrate the anniversary of his freedom, his moksha, when he left the body. And his whole life was one of being a very powerful warrior. Many people in India, you saw him near the end of his life when he was in his 70s and into his mid 80s. But when he was younger, he was very strong and stout. And his chest, he always led with his heart. And he had this big chest that he led with that heart and with that strength and that courage. He was more built like a bull in some ways. He had that kind of inner strength and power. And that's what is needed this time, is to emulate our teachers, to be like them, to tune into this quality of willpower. Yoganandaji defined willpower once as desire plus energy directed towards fulfillment. And so willpower is not just a cold, impersonal, severe kind of a thing. Desire plus energy directed towards fulfillment. And so it does include this quality of the heart. And so being warriors, which I'll talk about that aspect of it in a moment, is very, very important. There was a woman who was knew Swami Kriyananda from 1960s in India. Her name was Rani Ban, and she met many great saints and masters in her life. She, like a who's who of spiritual saints and masters she knew, visited with them, had them stay with her at her home. And a few years ago, her son, who also was a Kriya Yogi, he had a dream of his mother. And in this dream vision of his mother, she said that she was with Babaji. And she asked Babaji, why don't you do something to stop all the darkness that we see in the world today? That's a good question. If I saw Babaji, that might be similar to the question that I would ask him. I think we all would have some questions, but that was what she asked. And she said that Babaji answered by saying, darkness has its necessary place, since creation depends upon the duality of both light and dark for its very existence. But although I cannot stop the darkness, it is my job to help increase the light. And it's not just Babaji's job, it's our job also to increase the light. He's not here doing it, except to the extent that he does it through us. And so this is really, for those who have spiritual awareness, energy, compassion, all these things, it's really incumbent upon us now to have that strength and to share that strength with others. In some way, we're the adults in the room, because when everyone else is freaking out and going crazy, we've had some experience of calmness, of meditation, of sadhana, overcoming tests. We've had the example of these great teachers of ours. And so we do have a duty to be a warrior. It also, Swami Kriyanandaji said about being a warrior, he said something that's very, very important, more for our own personal growth. He said, if you want to become free in this lifetime, then be a warrior. So if we want to become free, if we want to achieve moksha, it takes that great strength. He said, don't be a beggar grasping for a little coin at the gates of heaven. And so this is the way also to our own personal divine freedom. Now, this idea of being a warrior, I think, is a little bit, some people think it's contrary to being a devotee and a lover of God. And sometimes people think it's one or the other. Oh, I'm just a devotee and I love God. And I have compassion and kindness, but being a warrior is not for me. But in fact, both together are actually necessary. Those who have true divine love, not just as a sentiment and as a nice, cozy, soft, warm, fuzzy feeling, but who have true love for God, that love is extraordinarily powerful. It is the power of the universe. Swami Kriyanandaji said that when he was with Anandamoyi Ma, who was one of her aspects, I guess, was divine love. But he said that she had this real power behind it, that when she would go walking, she was like marching like a general or a warrior in a way, but with this power of divine love, because true divine love is infinite and all powerful and has the power to really transform and change people. So that strength is part of being truly a lover of God and a devotee. It's not just a passive thing, which I'll talk about in a moment. And so being a warrior also requires that heart quality. It requires passion. It requires courage. When you hear of soldiers who are courageous, you say about them that they had a lot of heart, because courage comes from the heart. This is very interesting and not really tuned into very much. But that energy of the heart is the energy that really drives greatness, that drives spiritual power also. It comes from the heart. Swami Kriyanandaji, Paramhansa Yoganandaji, both of them, even though they were spiritual warriors in their own way and in different ways, they also had intense love for God, and really, really intense, of this divine love that was just on fire for God, to give themselves to God, to love God, to share God with others. And so that intensity of that power and that fire offered in service to God is really the power that creates a spiritual warrior in a way. I talk about this a lot, but the Pandava brothers, Yoganandaji said that they represent the different chakras, each of the different Pandava brothers. And Yoganandaji said that Bhim represents the heart chakra. And isn't it interesting that Bhim, he was the greatest of the strongest and the most powerful of the warriors. Arjuna was a great archer and a great warrior, of course. But when they wanted to defeat an entire army of giants and rakshasas, they would call Bhim, and he'd come storming in, and with his strength and his power and his just sheer physical energy. But also he had great passion, and he had great courage, and he had that great heart quality. And that is really the quality of a warrior. It comes from that passion of the heart, of wanting to give to others, of wanting to serve God. Now, if we don't meditate and that passion of the heart gets pulled downwards, then it just gets into emotions. And that's when it becomes agitated feeling rather than divine feeling, which is offered upward. And so we have to be very watchful of this. Yes, we want to develop that great, powerful feeling of the heart, but it also must be directed upwards. I'm going to read a quote from Swami Kriyanandaji about this approach. He said, "Love must be directed upward from the heart to the spiritual eye, where the inner light awaits every seeker. Without this upward direction, the heart's feelings, once awakened, may become dissipated in outwardness. Until one has mastered these principles, he may, to his surprise, find himself plunged into spiritual error, as the heart's energy is drawn downward suddenly by some karmic bomb, an unexpected tendency that manifests itself in the mind. His heart's energy must, therefore, be directed deliberately, even to some extent austerely, upwards to God." And so, if we understand this whole principle of developing and awakening the heart's feeling in the right way, with that intensity, but it must be directed upwards to God, and almost austerely, as Swamiji says. But when we can do it in that way, that's when it becomes true spiritual power and strength. When it gets caught in restlessness and desire and likes and dislikes and all these things, then it gets dissipated in outwardness, or even can get us pulled into some deep delusion or karmic bomb, as Yoganandaji would call these things. And you look in the Mahabharata, when you read the stories of Bhim, he was the one who was always getting into trouble, because when that energy was not calmed and directed upwards, it would create all of this karmic bombs of, he would get angry, he would go running around creating trouble and creating karma. But when it was directed in the right way, then he would become a spiritual warrior. And just interestingly, just as a sidelight, Yudhishthira represents the throat chakra. And Yudhishthira would be the one who would calm down the passions of young Bhim, who had this heart energy that would sometimes get out of control. And so when that heart energy is directed upwards through the calmness of the throat chakra and then up to the spiritual eye, that's when we have great spiritual power. And this is also what Swamiji was talking about how being a warrior is necessary for achieving moksha, for achieving divine freedom. And so willingness and these qualities of enthusiasm and overcoming likes and dislikes, which are the downward pulling tendencies of the heart, this is how we get there. Now, we also must have not just strength and power and the ability to give and be an anchor for people, for our family, for our friends, to give them strength, but we also must have compassion. We must have that quality of really giving that love to others and kindness during this time. And so it's really, we have to be those instruments. I tell a story that with Swami Kriyanandaji, when I was working for him on his staff, and he asked me to do something, a project one time, and it was a challenge for me. He knew that this was going to be very difficult for me to do. And so I was trying to figure out, how am I going to do this? And I was thinking I just need to work at it, pray to Divine Mother and try to understand it. And just 2 or 3 days later, he came up to me and said, "So have you done this yet?" And I sort of said, hemmed and hawed because I hadn't yet. And he just looked at me very strongly. He said, "Divine Mother is not going to do it for you. You have to do it." And so we can't be passive during this time. And great masters had great willpower. And so it's a strange thing. Divine Mother's not going to do it for us. In fact, strangely enough, I think we have to do it for Divine Mother. We have to act on her behalf and be her instrument. But it's also what she wants us to do, is to act as that instrument. And compassion and kindness for others, praying for others, is really a great spiritual, powerful spiritual quality. Acting as an instrument of the divine in that way. Swami Kriyananda, at his office in Pune, at the Pune ashram when he lived there, he had a poster there with a photograph and one of his quotes from one of his writings. And that quote was very interesting. It was, "Joy will be yours when you can hold the griefs of others up to God's love for his comfort. Joy will be yours when you can hold the griefs of others up to God's love for his comfort." And that's an interesting idea. Why would we have to hold the griefs of others up to God's love? Because God, Divine Mother, knows what all her children are doing, what they're going through. So she doesn't need to know. She doesn't need us to hold their griefs up to her. But the reason why this is such an important idea, why Swamiji had it in his own room there where he lived, it's important for us to do that. It's not because Divine Mother needs it. We need to do that. We need to pray for others. We need to go to the Divine Mother. And it's a good analogy is that if the children in a family, if one of them is seeing their brother or sister in grief and in sorrow and sadness and suffering, and they can't solve it or fix it, they'll go to the mother, and they'll go tug on the sari of the ma and say, Mother, so and so, she's suffering and she's in grief. Can you please help her? And the mother probably already knew, but the child who goes and offers the griefs of others in prayer, talking to God, to Divine Mother, it opens our heart and it really fulfills in some way the whole creation of all of us. When this universe was created and Divine Mother created all of His children, just like a mother who has many children, she wants those children to take care of each other, to help each other, to lift each other up, to pray for each other, to bless each other, to give them practical help and aid when they need it. And so this in some way also fulfills the reason for our creation, is not just to find God for ourselves and not just to have our own comfortable existence, but also to find a way to uplift those around us, whether it's those who we're locked down with and stuck now with, which is a real challenge for some families and for some people, or whether it's to serve others in the larger community. We do have a real duty and a responsibility to do this. And it's also pleasing to God. And this is why Swamiji wrote that, I think. When we offer the griefs of others up in prayer, but also in practical ways, trying to uplift the griefs of others, comfort them, help them with some love, with some kindness, with practical help, whether it's food for the needy, then God is pleased. God is joyful. And when we can do these things, you will find that you feel divine joy in your own heart when you can act as an instrument in this way. So it's time in these days, and probably going forward for some time, to act as an instrument for this light in a very strong and very powerful way, with willpower, with energy, with positivity, as a real strong warrior for light, for love, for compassion, for strength for others. And so use this time as really a very blessed opportunity to grow in that strength, to grow closer to God, to grow deeper in this divine joy that comes when we are pleasing to God, and especially when we are acting as an instrument of the divine light and love in this world. So act as an instrument, act with that strength, be confident as a child of the infinite that this divine power is wanting to flow through you, and that you don't have to be perfect, you can be far from perfect. We just need to be willing, sincere, and have this desire to give to others as an instrument of the divine, and you will find that the divine wants to use you. As imperfect as you are, as we are, God wants to use us as instruments. And it's really in that we, like I said, have great opportunity for spiritual growth in this lifetime. So let's close now with a healing prayer. Let's offer the love of our own hearts, but try to feel especially the divine love flowing through us. And we'll practice Yoganandaji's healing prayer together. And let's pray together. Divine Mother, Thou art omnipresent. Thou art in all Thy children. Manifest Thy healing presence in their bodies, minds, and souls. And rub the hands together, visualizing those in need. Raise the hands, chanting Om 3 times, sending them this grace and light of God. Om. And let's close with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters, we humbly bow to you all. Divine Mother, we are your children. May thy love shine forever on the sanctuary of our devotion, and may we be able to awaken thy love in all hearts. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. It's been a joy being with you, and I hope we can do this again. And again, act as an instrument for light, compassion, and grace to everyone around you and to everyone in this world. And you can find freedom simply through that.